Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi Achint. I have with me Lieutenant General Harimohan Iyer, sir. Firstly, sir, Namaskar, welcome to the show, and for the first time on Dev Talks. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you, and nice to be on your show for the first time. I
Thank you,
hope
sir.
we'll be in regular contact in future. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sir, recent moves by India in the Indian Ocean, and of course, considering the China front, and I want to focus on that a little bit. So you got the moves which are there in the Indian Ocean coinciding with the moves that the Chinese are, trying to do as far as their push towards the LAC with regards their military developments and about whatever they do, the helipads and all that stuff that they keep making. So how do you see this? Is this a balance now? India is basically sorted out in the LAC front, and now it's saying, okay, here I'm sorted. Now I need to kind of exert pressure on the other side. Is this a balance that India is trying to create? What is the main strategy, sir?
Okay. Firstly, thank you to have me on your show. As far as China is concerned, and as I look at China, the LAC is a standoff which is going to continue till we have a solution to it. And by and large, it's become a stalemate kind of a situation because
Mm.
we have closed all avenues whichever were possible for him to exploit. Initially, there was a little threat towards the Siliguri corridor. Post the Doklam incident, the way we blocked that and reinforced our localities, created a mountain strike code that has actually been taken care of. And same thing happened with Ladakh with rebalancing, the way we rebalanced our force structures. Both the Ladakh front and the central sector have been, as good as closed for the Chinese. We may not have superiority to have incursions into China, which possibly we don't aim to do so also. But we have literally made his incursions into us impossible. I'll say there's a wall which will be very difficult for him to even think of breaching. As far as the south or the peninsula is concerned, I go back to my younger years, maybe the beginning of this millennium, when there was this talk of this string of pearls. He created so many of assets, primarily in the Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, and the nearer Indian Ocean. Ambantota, Gwadar, the Myanmar, then some ports in the South China Sea. So when you
Mm.
added all of that, it created kind of an encirclement of India's waterways. Primarily, when you look at it, it is more than encircling India's waterway. He was trying to secure his own waterways because his energy sources come from West Africa, it used to come from Venezuela, it used to come from other parts of Africa around the Cape of Good Hope and had to transit this entire Indian Ocean corridor to go to where he wants it. He wants his energy sources to go to South China and East China. Whereas Gwadar and Myanmar gives him a link towards the areas from where he has to still push the energy resources back to his eastern and southeastern portions. So his actions, as I look at it, especially the Hambantota and Gwadar, were kind of insurance against any threat to his energy movement in the
Mm.
Indian Ocean. And if you recollect, it was a time when there was a lot of chatter going around saying that Indian Ocean is not India's ocean. It is, and there was even a talk to say that Indian Ocean should be renamed. Why are we calling it Indian Ocean? Why is it named after a country? And to that extent, even it was not limited to China. There were some other powers also which parroted that, including the United States. When Diogo Garcia was being questioned as to why the United States is sitting there, he says Indian Ocean is not India's domain. But when you look at the Indian Ocean today, the only nation which has a peninsular control on the Indian Ocean is India. When you look at the Indian map, in a peninsular manner, it juts out like and dominates the entire waterways on the Indian Ocean. And I have been always been an advocate of the Andaman and Nicobar being a force multiplier, and I even add Lakshadweep to it, though we can talk about Lakshadweep later. Andaman and Nicobar actually sits as a focal point along the major shipping routes. both the channels through which the shipping routes pass, they pass through the Greater Andaman and the Nicobar chain of islands. And holding these islands actually dominates every shipping route which goes through Malacca and Sunda Straits towards China, which is a major thing, which I think the Americans saw it very clearly. And they, about 10 years ago, started looking at this area to be somewhere where they can counter China's growth, especially in the South China Sea and the areas towards the east. And they wanted to limit or put pressure on China and release pressure which China used to put on Taiwan, Japan,
Yeah.
and the Pacific. And that is why this nomenclature of Indo-Pacific came about 7, 8 years ago. And the command which was in Hawaii was renamed as Indo-Pacific Command, actually in President Trump's last tenure. And that is when, and I was actually in the National Defense College in 2014, and we were a part of a strategic game which was talking about the Indo-Pacific and the Quad. And the Quad was in the conception stage at that time. And this Act East policy, which was enunciated by the Prime Minister when he took over in May 2014, became the catalyst to take Quad and the Indian Ocean to the next level.
Mm.
Unfortunately, the last 10 years, the way it could have gone or the way it should have gone, we have not been able to push
Yeah.
it. Primarily because I guess 3 years of pandemic pushed us our growth rates behind, and there were certain vested interests, especially in the Southeast Asian region, which were not very palatable to India's growth in that region. If you recollect, in the 2015 and 2016, India's say in the ARF and the ASEAN Regional Forum and ASEAN as an economic forum was very high. And suddenly there were, Chinese influence in that. The SCO came about, cut down Indian influence in those regions. And ASEAN nations also started looking at India with a little degree of suspicion. So if I
Mm.
was looking at a period, let's say 2016 to 2022, there was definitely a little, I won't say a drop, but a stagnation in the Indian Act East policy. Some people also looked at the Act East policy as an internal arrangement for India. People started saying that, it is an effort to get the Northeast to get aligned. Of course, it's a Northeast getting aligned or being the launch pad to the Act East is a prerequisite.
Correct.
The way we have gone about stabilizing, creating infrastructure, especially in Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, and Mizoram, uh, points to that direction, but there are certain areas where we did not possibly exploit it. And one of that could be there was a proposal to link Laos through Myanmar and Thailand to Muri. And there was that highway which was proposed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was supposed to be a counter to the Chinese BRI, which was going to the north and also becoming a kind of a via media between his maritime Silk Route and his land Silk Route. And there was a lot of problems, possibly at Myanmar and to some level at Cambodia, I guess, and some nations they did not play up to the game. Otherwise, today that would have been a beautiful infrastructure, could have been even extended into a railroad network. This is the network which the Japanese used in the World
Yep.
War II to progress from Malaysia into Myanmar and into our northeast. It's very much exploitable, and unfortunately, that needs that's one area which we can discuss a little later. So, what has happened is now in the last 4 5 months, especially with the current term of President Trump, Quad has unfortunately not been given the kind of relevance which he gave in his first term, and President Biden was also playing the same line. He, the first thing which President Trump did was he, started pulling down the Quad, primarily because of whatever ego issues he may have had with our Prime Minister post the May 2025 events. I wouldn't like to go into it, but it's very obvious that he was trying to play down India wherever he could. And in that context, Quad got, I started calling it a straight line because the only two nations which were playing up to Quad were Japan and India to some
Yeah.
extent. And now I believe Australia, thanks to this current visit of the Prime Minister, two visits of current Prime Minister and two visits of the Australian Prime Minister, it has at least become a triangle. And at some stage, I feel your United States has no choice but to reinforce the Quad, because that's the only organization which can control the Chinese influence in this region. I think I'll stop here and we can discuss issues there.
Sir, see that I agree with you in the aspect that the Chinese have kind of tried their best to set up their own game in this place, and they've kind of created these points where presumably, and a lot of writing seems to say so, that China dominates and stuff like that. Here is the question before anything else: why does everybody kind of say that China because China has a port in a place, it starts to dominate that region and it's theirs and this and that. But whereas any other country also has a port, we have a port in Haifa, we have naval basing facilities for us in Dukum, in Singapore, in Philippines, in Vietnam. Why is the narrative so different? Because at the end of it, we are doing the same thing, right? It's port-led development at one aspect of it, which is the civilian part of it, and we sneak in with our navy and do what we need to do in those areas. So why is the narrative so different? And that's something that we need. Why are we not, so aware of our ports rather than we are everybody like keeps saying, oh, Hamban Tota Chinese are sitting there. They're not sitting there. I mean, the reality is right back. They're not.
No, no, they
No.
don't. So, Adi, when I was a class 10 or 11 student, I'm going back 45 years in life. One of the career options to me was joining the merchant navy. And Indian presence in the merchant navy cadre is possibly one of the highest in
Yeah.
the world. We carry
Even
the
now.
maximum amount of seafarers, both in terms of
Yeah.
domestic and international community. So my larger point when I say that is the thought process of India being a seafaring nation is not new. Unfortunately, everybody thinks that it has started now. We have been the biggest contributors to merchant shipping in the world. The
Mm.
only area where we possibly did not expand ourselves was we kept our military navy or a militarized navy to our what we used to call a
Small.
brown water.
Mm.
We were more looking at only our eastern seaboard on Bay of Bengal and our western seaboard in Bombay. And we were very much happy with our dominating our own shipping lines and our EEZs. That was where we were. As late as I think 2000, when I was doing my staff college, the India's neighborhood was only looked at as SAARC countries. It was only around 2007, 8, 9 when we started talking about our extended neighborhood. And then we expanded it to the Horn of Africa in the east and to, let's say, ASEAN in the west. And these are things which could have been done or should have been done much earlier because we were a potent force in this region. We had domination of, like I said, the Andaman Nicobar Command was always kept as an outpost.
Mm.
It used to be called Fortran, Fortress Andaman Nicobar. And it was just an naval outpost till as late as 2000. It was only after 2000, post Kargil War, when we set up a Tri Services Command in Andaman Nicobar. Having set up a Tri Services Command, did we give it the kind of juice that it needed? Unfortunately, no. We did create a Tri Services Command, but the staffing which stayed in Andaman Nicobar, both in terms of air, naval, and army assets, remained almost the same. There was some addition to some naval assets. Primarily, it was said that the naval assets will be in our domestic homeland and it will be placed on requirements. So, which meant that it continued to be an outpost despite being created into a command. I always maintained that the Port Blair airstrip is a floating carrier force. You can use it to launch or dominate the entire Sunda and Malacca Straits because that falls into the region of your surveillance aircrafts. But somehow it was never stationed there. We were very limited and we were not very forthcoming in creating anything beyond our domestic borders. It was post Hamban Tota. Since you say Hamban Tota, when the Chinese started using Hamban Tota as a strategic asset in the form that the naval ships started doing port calls, or base coming for a logistic pause at this area. That is when possibly we started looking at trying to expand outwards. China's requirement of Humban Tota is a little different, and I always say it actually falls midway between any route of his shipping lanes coming via Suez or via Cape of Good Hope. And if he needs to dominate these two shipping lanes, he needs to have assets which are operating in the area between Sri Lanka and Africa, that huge water space. And for that, for his mainland, he needed a midway port, and that is what he's looking at Gwadar and Hambantota to fulfill. But if he starts basing his naval assets in that region, he may or may not have any intentions towards cutting India's sea routes. But the very fact that he has assets in our neighborhood forces us to start looking at other areas. And that is when, Seychelles, um, to some extent, bases in Laos, Cambodia, and now we are talking about Greater Nicobar. Greater Nicobar, something I saw in 2008. I landed in Campbell Bay the first time when I was doing my Hackerman course in 2008. And when you flew over the Campbell Bay airstrip, you realize, oh, this is much better than even Port Blair. There's so much of scope to expand this airstrip, make it operational, and let it be your, third. That time it was talking to the third aircraft carrier. The point is, there was a little lack in thought, I guess, and possibly lack in resolve to possibly contest China in those regions. Or maybe we were not as strong a nation in terms of economic growth. We were still in the growing phase, and we didn't want to possibly ruffle feathers at that stage. But today, when you look at Greater Nicobar project, you put the Greater Nicobar project, it will create a huge economic change in the manner our trade will will show, because it will kind of replicate or attract those areas which today find no space in ports like Singapore and Malaysia. And that is the reason, if you look at the way Indonesia looks at it, the Sabang port, Greater Nicobar cannot take over the complete thing, so that needs to have satellite ports to supplement it. And Sabang happens to be another one. And India doesn't have to be in competition with Singapore. It can be complementary to each other. We are contemporaries and not enemies of any nature. So if you put everything together, that complete circle with Campbell Bay or Greater Nicobar in the center, if you put a circle of, let's say, 500 nautical miles, you can dominate that entire area, and your Malacca Straits actually happens to be the epicenter of that complete circle which one looks at. And that is going to create a huge amount of discomfort. And also point out to people who have nullified the Quad that Quad actually matters. If at all you have to curtail China's belligerence in that region, we have to choke him out at the place which actually is going to hurt him. And so Malacca Strait is one big thing. People say Sunda Straits. If he wants to go around Sunda Strait, it adds to 48 hours of shipping travel, which I
It's
don't
not
think
deep
he's
enough, sir. It's not deep enough.
not deep enough, and he will not want to go. Why should he want? Why would he want to go?
I mean, you take a submarine there, he has to come out and come out. I mean, there's no.
No, I hope you fly over the Andaman Sea.
No, yeah. He'll fly over with a submarine and with, yeah,
No,
yeah,
no,
of
I'm
course.
saying if you fly over the Andaman Sea,
Yeah.
you find ships, lined up like
Uh-huh.
like containers.
Yeah.
It's like a highway,
Back to
and
back.
back-to-back ships, floating around that. So that kind of shipping traffic which is there, and it is somewhat ununderstandable as to why we were hesitant to go there. And I'm very happy, at least
You
now,
start.
with the vision of our Prime Minister that we are actually beginning to act east. And this is the first phase which I'm looking at, and maybe we can, when I discuss a little more regarding what we have done.
Yeah, that's basically my final question. I think we can discuss that. So, sir, now we should actually, the end part of this program, we should actually talk about what's happening as far as the expansion of our interests. We can talk east and west, both ways. If you actually track Prime Minister Modi's visits, from, I mean, you look at Greece to UAE to Israel to Ethiopia. Ethiopia was very curious to me. Then Seychelles. There's a lot of interaction with Moscow, with Mauritius and all that. So that covers the western flank. And then on the east, if you look at it, starting from Myanmar, Japan, the prime minister's visit to India, so it's an interaction, right down to Philippines, which happened some time ago, to Brunei, where Prime Minister Modi went. I mean, it was quite a surprise. Brunei is a very small country for a Prime Minister of India to go there, and then of course Indonesia right now. So you see that eastern flank also kind of coming up. So what is the plan here, sir?
I will expand your western thing to Norway.
Yeah, of course. You can.
First time somebody went that far down to Norway,
Yeah, yeah,
you see the kind of influence we are gaining, because Europe today is in a huge strain with the United States.
correct, correct, sir.
So you gain influence in Europe, and especially those three trade agreements you have done with the
Mm,
Scandinavians, the EU, and especially with France, Germany, and UK. And you look at it the way the US trade agreement is getting stuck. So it's a beautiful counterbalance, and that is what I look at it. Similarly, Ethiopia is the Horn of Africa. That's what we always call as our extended neighborhood. So Ethiopia is very important to India because it gives you access towards the the African mainland. We have a little issue regarding North African nations. I don't see a lot of influence in Indian influence in the North African regions, particularly Morocco, Egypt, and Libya. That is where the Pakistanis have a little more influence. But when you look at the African subcontinent, right down from Ethiopia in the north, down to South Africa in the south, that entire region we have a very good influence, and we have very large Indian population. So in Indian origin population in these regions. So it's important that we show. And remember Seychelles, he has gone there at least three times, and he just went there for a short visit where there was a National Day celebration where he was the chief guest, and he got the honor of the national biggest national award of the nation there. So it makes a lot of sense to dominate the Indian Ocean right from the eastern rim. That is what you were talking about, Philippines, Laos, Malaysia. That's what I call as the eastern rim of the Indian Ocean. It
sure.
may be South China Sea or East China Sea or whatever smaller sea, but in the larger context, they are all part of the Indian Ocean region. And on the west, when you look at Mauritius, Seychelles, um, Madagascar, South Africa, Ethiopia. That gives you the eastern rim of it. So when you look at this complete influence, we need to have a presence in this region, and trade has to flow from east to west. And if you want to be the fulcrum of this trade, when you say trade coming out of Suez or the Persian Gulf and flowing towards the east, it has to flow through Malacca Strait. There's no other choice. If it flows through Malacca Straits, you have to sit in the center in the fulcrum, and that is where we have faltered in all these times. Primarily because there was Sri Lanka below us, and our influence in this region was consistently being removed. When you look at the way Maldives responded to us 5 6 years ago, it was the attempt of Chinese to remove our influence from this region. And that's why I said there's some other time we can keep talking about Lakshadweep. It's one huge asset that we have on our western seaboard, which actually can make a huge difference in the way India operates in that region. When you look at Lakshadweep, it sits, at the base of this complete shipping line, which originates from East Africa and the Suez and the Persian Gulf. So it is there is a huge amount of scope to expand our influence in the Indian Ocean, and I believe if we don't do it, we should have done it 30 years ago because we were the dominant power in this region. Unfortunately, our vision those days was more internal, like I said, and we were land based, focused on land based operations. It's only now that we have started, expanding our might. It takes time, I guess. India as a nation has grown more than 300% in this last 20 years. So that also complements to the capability, and our population strength has also grown from about
Yeah,
100 billion to 100 million, 1000 million to about 1.5 billion. So that 30% population strength also increases your influence in that region. Uh, I believe what we have done now is given a lot of jitters, especially to China. you know, putting influence in Philippines, in Vietnam. Vietnam was there for a long time. Cambodia. When I was the commandant of the School of Artillery, we used to run artillery courses for the Cambodian army twice a year. Twice in India, and twice I used to send a team to Cambodia. Not many people know about it. And it is something we have been creating influence, because Cambodia is looking at countries like India, which can enable their strength. That's very good. And Laos is something which has now started. There have been interaction between the Laos foreign minister who came to India very recently. If you look at all these three nations along with Vietnam, it actually creates a big problem for China. And with Philippines in the east, and now Indonesia in the southeast, it is southwest. It's going to create even more difficulty for it. China doesn't have great influence in Thailand to that extent that it can bother us. And Myanmar is I call it it's not an all weather scenario. It is a forced weather scenario that Myanmar current regime has looked at China, and we have greater inroads into Myanmar in the last 3 to 4 years. Complement all this together, I guess the amount of influence India has grown, especially in the East Asia, over the last 2 to 3 years, is huge. And the way we are going about it, it's going to only create a huge counterbalance to China. And China will be forced to start reacting this side, which the United States will understand that it is only India which can create this counterbalance and come back to reignite the Quad. I believe President Trump wants to restart the Quad initiative again. So
He wants to do another meeting in Philippines or something like that.
that's what Rubio came to India for.
What clown,
He
sir. I
wanted
mean,
to mend fences which have been damaged beyond repair. And yet the way
sorry to interrupt.
he
What a clown. I mean, first you don't want to have a very quad meeting for 1.5 years. Now you want to do one every 3 months.
so the when you are the when the India is the president of Quad, you neglect Quad totally, and now you want to again resurrect Quad. It doesn't work that way. You can't neglect a nation like India just because it didn't fit into your global war game. And the beating which everybody says, US has created a huge amount of growth in Central Command region after this Iran conflict. My view is a little different. I feel it has got stretched out, and now it's feeling the pain of being in that region. And it is going to hurt it in the coming years, because if you don't complete an operation fully, it is only going to drain your resources in the region, and it will get even more committed. Only 2 years back it managed to pull out of Afghanistan and
Yeah.
try to resurrect itself. Now it's got itself back into a situation, and the Russians won't let them go. If we trust me, the Russians will ensure that they get stuck there in the deep mud the way Russians are stuck in Ukraine. So, in that context, the United States has to look at somebody to assist it to maintain China. It cannot manage China without a strong nation like India in the eastern side, because all said and done, Australia and Japan are more economic power, and they don't have that kind of military support to give to the Quad. It's
Yeah.
only India which has got, and in our interest, we do need to have that influence, because we need to draw China out of our land border. Though, like I said, we have created a wall there. We need to create more problems for him in other areas, so that he does not think of doing anything in the north. So the stretch out has to be pulled out towards the area which is hurting him, and for him the energy resource has to flow from the Indian Ocean region, and that's
That's
how
the
I look at it. That's how I
that's
look at
where
it.
the BrahMos policy comes into place.
Absolutely. BrahMos may not. It's a vision. Something is there, and whether it gets used or not, these are issues beyond. Because BrahMos, you must understand, is a anti-ship missile. Basically, it's an anti-ship missile. So China is going to be very cautious about it. It's got its effect on shipping is huge, and its accuracy has been demonstrated last year. That was the best thing that came out of Op Sindoor, that BrahMos's value has been recognized world over. And the sale of BrahMos earlier to Vietnam, now to Philippines and Indonesia. And there'll be more. Trust me, you said Brunei. Brunei is an extension of Malaysia. You must understand that whole area which is away from Indonesia, and it gives the kind of support to look at the southern shoulder of the South China Sea. So we need to look at both these sides to force the Chinese to start thinking that yes, I can't have the whole thing by myself.
This is interesting, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. This was very interesting. I think
In the middle, yeah. But that notwithstanding, I think we spent an hour, half an
no,
hour
no,
together. Yeah,
that's perfectly all right. So those the network is, you know, how it is.
yeah.
I get I call it
I'm unfortunately not in my permanent space, so I have
no, I
to
call
be.
it ISI action, sir. Every time the
Yeah,
network goes, ISI
I
one.
guess I should also be careful with ISI these days.
Yeah. Simple state when nothing else, blame them.
Great to be on your show, Adi, and hope
Thank you,
we'll
sir.
have more
Thank you so
of
much.
this. Huh? And
To the audience, sir, please.
yeah, yeah, yours. Thank you.
To the audience, my request to everybody is please like, subscribe, and share this with your friends and families. And let us know if you want me to discuss something in specific with the general. And of course, we will keep continuing doing topics like this. So, request everybody to again support the channel, and we shall see you back with another update. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai
Thanks,
Bharat.
Jay. Thank you.